Hey everybody, welcome to our live stream. It's great to be here on a beautiful, relatively non-windy Wednesday morning here. We want to thank everybody who participated in the Solidarity Collective auction of esoteric things last week. Because of your support and your interest in our oddities, we were able to raise about $150 for the collective to help meet our numerous winter expenses. Because as you know, we run out of money in the middle of the dead of winter every year. I'm Matt, and we have Derek on as well this morning. And how are you doing today, Derek?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, and it's nice to, as I said, it's nice to kind of look out and see the beauty of the landscape here without seeing things blow over and trees breaking and people blowing over and all sorts of windy things. So it's good
Yeah.
to be here. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Derek's work on what we're going to be talking about today, which is energy denialism and the various manifestations of energy denialism in Wyoming. And after last week's clownish statement by Representative Chuck Gray here in Wyoming, Derek undertook a project of not just sort of debunking what Representative Gray said, which he had said that wind turbines were the cause of Texas power outages during the horrible Texas winter storm there. And Derek, you not only kind of debunked that or found the best stories and the best media debunking that, but you also sort of put that into context of what the role that Representative Gray was playing politically and ideologically, right?
Yeah, that was my main intention. I went in the essay, I went into, I guess, the role that the fossil fuel industry has in propping up politicians like that, and the way they act in their own self-interest that is not in the best interest of the majority of people who live on the planet.
Right. Well, I just want to start. So the story really starts with, in many ways, with this terrible, or at least this iteration of the story starts with this terrible winter storm that ravaged the South. And by the way, much love and solidarity to all of our friends and comrades in southern states and in places where you haven't had to deal with this. I really hate the sort of people making fun of you and liberals in particular going, oh, look what happened to these conservative southern states. I think that that's really unfair. I'm really glad you're out of it. I'm so sorry that you all had to deal with it. And in the process of that, you had these terrible power outages, which we'll talk a little bit about why, the real reason why they happened. But all of the conservatives, including your, Texas leaders and anti, and climate denialists and energy denialists, really all over the country, started using this this trope that the Texas grid failed because of the reliance on renewable energy. And so that happened last week. And then Representative Gray made his statement about a week ago. I think it was on on February 16th, as Derek points out in his piece, which will become part of a larger blog post, by the way, which we're going to do. And that happened. And just as we were working on that story and Derek was sharing his research on that story, I got a link sent to me by our good friend, Lynn Huskisson, former House candidate in Wyoming, who is a former coal miner also, who ran on a platform of the Green New Deal and renewable energy and transitioning and helping Wyoming's workers. And Lynn sent me an article saying, really an analysis from the Powder River Basin Resource Council, talking about a deal between the Department of the Interior and Eagle Mines, which also encompasses Blackjewel mines. And so Contura, Eagle Butte, and Bellaire mines, all of which are closing and are paying a fraction of the money that they owe to the government for royalties. This sort of major screw job that occurred with this happened just as Representative Gray was dissing on renewables and implying that if Texas and other parts of the country just relied on coal and fossil fuels and natural gas and all of that, then that everything would be fine. And so the irony of that, and sort of the global irony of that, is what drove what I saw as sort of this larger picture of energy denialism, and particularly the way it operates in Wyoming. And Derek, did you want to read? If you have it in front of you, you could read maybe the first couple of paragraphs of what you wrote, and just in terms of what it means for what happened with Chuck Gray. And I was thinking you could read to the last sentence in that big paragraph. These unfounded attacks.
Okay, sure.
And just do that, and we'll that way we can edit this and stick that on our podcast. So go ahead.
Great, yeah. So on February 16th, Wyoming State Representative Chuck Gray of District 57 asserted on his Facebook page, "Just as Wyoming conservatives predicted, the Texas grid is failing because of their reliance on renewables. I'm bringing a bill to the upcoming legislative session to assert that utility decisions be made with consideration to reliability. We must save our coal-fired power plants." Congressman Gray's effort to conform to one of the most lucrative tenets of the GOP party line shows how little he respects the intelligence of his constituents, as his statement on Facebook makes one of the most easily refutable yet oft-repeated claims by his particular brand of punditry. In the continuing wake of Winter Storm Uri, this claim has seen a renewal in mainstream political discussion. These unfounded attacks on the supposed unreliability of renewable energy sources are long past due for retirement.
So my favorite thing about the statement that Chuck Gray made was, I'm bringing a bill to the upcoming legislative session to assert that utility decisions must be made with consideration to reliability. And then the very next sentence is, we have to save our coal-fired power plants, which if he had just marked the card at reliability, then what we would, that would be very difficult to argue with, I guess, right? In the wake of something unreliable going on, but it's not what he asserted it was, is it?
Yeah, something about that statement is contradictory there.
Well, what exactly happened in Texas, or to the best of our knowledge and the information that was made available to us, why did Texas power grid fail?
So what we've seen, the biggest factor in the failure of Texas's power grid was their separation from the rest of the country's power grids. And this is something that I think most of the public is learning kind of altogether, is that most of the state of Texas is altogether on the Texas interconnection, a power grid that's separate from the major power grids that cover the rest of the continental United States, most of which are part of the Western and Eastern interconnections. And there's also a couple of other smaller ones in Florida and in the Midwest, I believe. But with what we see with the story in Texas, this dates back to the 70s when they decided to separate from the rest of the country. So no part of the Texas interconnection crosses outside of the state of Texas, and this makes them exempt from federal regulation. And their separation from the rest of the power grid is what's made it so they weren't able to take on power from the rest of the country. So they were they could only rely on the power generation that they had in state. I'm not hearing what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Which I was just saying. Is this a condition that that any other state has to deal with? Is there any other state with an autonomous power grid?
So from what I saw on the map, there's part of Florida, most of southern Florida is a separate power grid from, I believe, the Eastern Interconnection. I don't know if it's the same system as Texas, where they're not able to extract power from the surrounding grids without like an AC to DC adaptation. And then, of course, the Alaska and Hawaii have to do their own thing for much more pragmatic reasons rather than political reasons.
Geographical reasons. Well, okay, so in the face of this, also one of the other, kind of results of this power grid autonomy, right, is that Texans, of course, suffered greatly, and this is all also bound up in this billing system where a number of Texans were then billed thousands of dollars during the process. How did you get to see anything about how that happened?
That wasn't a main focus of my research, but I guess like from what you would learn in a basic economics class with the capitalist system that we live under, if the price is determined by the intersection of supply and demand, then when the demand is high and the supply is low, then the price is going to be astronomically high. And that is the system that determines whether or not a person or whether or not people deserve to have electricity, apparently. We can see the same thing with like the prices of hotel rooms skyrocketing and like the price of regular household commodities when a hurricane approaches in areas of the South.
These are called market failures in the parlance of the terminology, and they are that. They are definitely market failures, but they're also, in a deeper and more authentic sense, miserable failures to meet human needs that are treated as logically as afterthoughts by the architects of this kind of system. You can't tell me that when Texas was making its decision to separate its power grid from the rest of the fucking United States, that anybody in that room, said, well, this could also lead to this incredible market failure and these incredible unnatural price spikes in the event of a weather incident like this. And so it seems like it's a not just a market failure, but a kind of failure of imagination, I guess.
Like with what I talked about in the blog with the enormous influence between the fossil fuel industry moguls and the politicians, very common throughout the United States, who are paid by these moguls to support their industry. You can imagine it was not very different in the 70s when they made this decision to have their ERCOT Texas interconnection separate from the rest of the United States power grids.
You, as you were doing this research, came across some interesting memes to illustrate these lies and just the way that this stuff is distorted. What are some things that you found?
Yeah, it was very interesting. So one of the memes that it's been going around to spread this lie about the unreliability of wind, it was a photograph of a wind turbine, and there's a wind turbine spraying some sort of de-icing fluid on the turbine blades. Let's see. The meme was, it was created during this major blackout crisis. It was an old photograph from 2015 in a wind farm in Sweden. We can talk about the backstory in a little bit, but the meme that was shared had the caption like, a helicopter powered by fossil fuels spraying a fluid or a chemical created by fossil fuels during a ice storm to help put these wind turbines back online is hilarious. And the idea that they're trying to spread is that this is what's going on in Texas. There's an ice storm, and to put the power back on because of our reliance on all these wind turbines, we have to have these helicopters go out to like de-ice all of these wind turbines. Now, this photograph, of course, it wasn't photographed during an ice storm. I think that doesn't seem like a very practical thing to have your helicopter flying around in a storm anyway. It was photographed as part of like a research and development test as for wind turbine weatherization technology. And so like the technology that's in wind turbines all around the world, like we've talked about, we have wind turbines in Canada or Antarctica. They were using this as like, we've got to immediately de-ice these blades so that we can, use it as a control factor, that sort of thing.
Wow. Well, certainly the nature of viral misinformation about this is part of the picture, and part of the picture of the kind of soundbite politics that Representative Gray tries to make out of it. And I know that this was covered, so Chuck Gray's statements were also covered and debunked by a number of local, or a couple of local media outlets. But it really illustrates the very reactionary nature, and not just reactionary ideologically, but reactionary, like it was almost like a reflex. It almost seemed reflexive, right? That that a far right Wyoming politician would immediately cook up a fraudulent soundbite, or a soundbite based on misinformation, and immediately say, I'm going to do something about this that's going to protect Wyoming's fossil fuel industry, and just finding a way to make that link through all of these spurious claims. And so one of the questions that we're asking is why that level of kind of inauthenticity and dishonesty and deception and reactionary reliance on misinformation, and what is it that motivates or incentivizes that kind of political behavior in the state, here in Wyoming. And Derek had some things to say about it, which again we'll be publishing as a post on the blog Cowboys on the Commons, along with this episode here as a podcast. But during this last week, we then got this other piece of information from Lynn Huskisson, sending us the Powder River Basin Resource Council's release on this deal, this really, really bad deal that was struck between the Department of Interior during the Biden administration. Technically, if you want to get real technical, it was an ongoing negotiation process from before, and it was finalized by the new administration. And what it is that as all of these coal mines that are operating in northern Wyoming have to, and all over Wyoming, have to pay royalties. And as they're going bankrupt, as they're going through this bankruptcy process, because people are not buying coal anymore. And so as they're going through this process, they are making these deals with the government to pay a fraction in royalties. And this is, even though this is to me the kind of core of this revelation is that as this is happening, and as they're paying a fraction of royalties in the bankruptcy process, they are also paying their CEOs huge bonuses and continuing those bonuses as they parachute out of these crashing planes that are these bankrupt coal companies. So the executives are getting all their bonuses. The workers are not getting their pensions in many cases. Their pensions are getting cut. Their health benefits are getting cut. No, a fraction of royalties that they're paying, but the CEOs are making bonuses. And I wanted to read just the first few lines of this Powder River Basin Resource Council release on Eagle Specialty Materials, which is Eagle Butte, Bel Air, and the Eagle Butte, Contura, and Bel Air mines, as well as Blackjewel mines. Now it's all under the umbrella of ESM. And I wanted to read this release that came out last week. And again, thanks, Lynn, for sending this to me. On Friday, February 19th, the Department of Interior, Specialty Materials, ESM, and the attorneys in Blackjewel's bankruptcy case released a settlement agreement for unpaid royalties on federal coal leases mined by Blackjewel and its predecessor Contura at the Eagle Butte and Bel Air mines in Wyoming's Powder River Basin. According to the legal filing, over $32 million in royalties are unpaid at the Bel Air mine, and $27.8 million in royalties are unpaid at the Eagle Butte mine, with hundreds of thousands owed in interest. Powder River Basin Resource Council decries the sweetheart deal struck between the Department of the Interior and ESM, a company that was paid over $80 million to take over the Bel Air and Eagle Butte coal mines from Contura during the Blackjewel bankruptcy proceeding in October 2019. The settlement of approximately $61.5 million debt of unpaid royalties and interests for a few cents on the dollar and insecure interest-free future payments and royalties has cost Wyoming and American citizens tens of millions of dollars. Wyoming receives approximately half of all federal coal royalties, so loses half of these unpaid royalties. And then I just want to quote from Bob Laresh, who's a board member of the Powder River Basin Resource Council. This terribly one-sided settlement allows Bel Air and Eagle Butte to keep operating for now, but it forgives tens of millions of dollars in royalties that should have been supporting Wyoming schools and other federal projects. So that's on the Department of Interior. It's certainly on the mines themselves. And we should also say all of this is taking place on stolen indigenous land, and the entire system of settler state colonialism and capitalism, when you combine all of this theft, the theft that occurred before, the ongoing theft, the theft to stakeholders, even within the paradigm of mining and all of that terrible extraction, when you combine all of that, this is a tiny few people benefiting at the expense of just countless people, as well as the environment, as well as entire civilizations. And so it might just sound like, this one bankruptcy settlement and this one termination settlement, but it really is the crossroads of just centuries of historical oppression and exploitation. And so it's kind of enraging, I think. And if people are feeling anger about that, that's probably appropriate, don't you think?
Yeah, of course. Near the end of my essay, I really tried to go into how the underlying cause of, not necessarily, in a way, like the increasing intensity of the weather patterns that we're experiencing all over the world, but also the underlying cause of, the power system failure, in this case in Texas, as well as A lot of the deaths in Texas and around the country in this past storm were unhoused people who didn't have a shelter. The common factor we see in all of this is the global capitalist system that we have.
Indeed, and the unique way that that manifests where fossil fuel is concerned, and also where at that intersection, the colonization of indigenous lands and the ongoing colonization of indigenous land in this process.
Right. Yeah.
So I also wanted to, or we also wanted to celebrate the resistance to that, wherever and in whatever forms that takes. Last week, we talked to an activist about pipeline resistance, which is tied in the joint solidarity and the joint efforts of indigenous-led struggles, and also struggles against the fossil fuel empire across the board. We talked about that. The person who gave me this article and who has been on our show, Lynn Huskinson, was a coal miner for many decades who lost her job when these coal mines went out of business and screwed over the workers out of their benefits in the process. And that inspired Lynn to run for the House of Representatives last year on perhaps one of the most progressive agendas I've ever seen, with a state candidate, and really with a mind to saying that, if we embrace actual science and embrace actually what's going on, then maybe we can make life better for everyone, including those who are displaced economically by this. And so it seems like there's a lot of openings for that kind of stuff, as well as openings of space for radical activism and direct action and organizing around these kinds of issues. And I think it's so important then that they see that we see that conclusion, that this is all part of a systemic thing. This is not human nature. This is not inevitable. This is part of a carefully engineered and built system, isn't it?
Yeah. With what you were saying, I think a good historical example we can look to for inspiration is that of Judy Berry. In the 80s and 90s, she was very instrumental in making an alliance between Earth First, which was it's a radical environmentalist group, and the Industrial Workers of the World, a radical labor group. She helped the people to see that, people who are doing direct action on behalf of protecting the environment and the working class, whether they be lumber workers or coal workers or oil pump workers, they're not enemies with each other. They share the common enemy of the capitalist class, who is the ones who are doing the most to both screw over the working class, exploiting their labor, as well as completely destroying the earth in sorry about that, completely decimating our our chances to be able to use resources in a sustainable way.
Right. I think that's so important, because one thing that Lynn and I talked about on the episode where we interviewed her, and that's called Coal's False Hope, I think. I'll edit that out if it's not, but it's one of our recent episodes of Solidarity Wyoming. And we talked about how difficult it was sometimes to form alliances between groups that are pressing for change, and then also, a lot of the workers who are most affected by these decisions, and the distrust that workers have of outside voices kind of telling them what to do. And so I think that the importance of forging those alliances carefully, and really emphasizing, to me, I think it's helpful to emphasize that systemic cause, to say, look, this isn't about the Biden administration or the Obama administration hating you and wanting to hurt you personally. And it's not about the Trump administration and people, like Wyoming politicians, for example, Chuck Gray, and others wanting to help you. This isn't like some kind of personal thing. This is really about organizing around this systemic issue. And activists like Judy Berry, who can bring together militant labor with militant environmentalism, serve much the same function, as, activists like Fred Hampton, who can bring together, folks of, different, who are in different kind of ethnic group enclaves and others, around that common systemic thing, so that it doesn't become about personal attacks, but really becomes about people uniting around systemic change. So that was not very articulate, but I do my best. Anyway, this is really informative. We're going to have a lot of information on it. We want people to continue to clown Wyoming politicians when they sort of spread these lies. Anything else you want to add, Derek?
I think this discussion has got me thinking about a portion of Yana's book, Together Resilient. She talks about how the Dancing Rabbit intentional community in Missouri was not only able to make itself, carbon neutral in as far as its electrical usage, but able to generate electricity to put out onto the power grid to the surrounding community. I think that's a great example of, the potential for an interconnected yet decentralized form of meeting people's needs.
I love the idea of both interconnected and decentralized. To me, that's the best of anti-capitalist thought. It's reflected in a number of different exponents of post-capitalist economics, where it's not a forced choice. It's not like you have to go off the grid. It's that you fundamentally redefine the grid and redefine ownership of the grid in ways that then guarantee both decentralized power and centralized sharing of resources and sharing of information, as a way of just kind of making everything sustainable. And I think that, it totally proves that where there's a will, there's a way, and where, people have control of their environments and destinies democratically, then it's possible for that to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on and for pointing me in the direction of some of the sources that I used in that blog post.
Yeah, it was really some amazing research, and thank you so much for doing it. I think that it points the way towards, maybe analyzing more Wyoming issues and contemporary issues like this in Wyoming in a more systemic way, which I think ultimately will push the way forward for everyone, not in a partisan way, but in a way that, can really emancipate everyone. So thanks a lot, Derek.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So this has been the Solidarity House live stream. And if you like this content and want us to continue to make it available to the people of Wyoming for free, and other places as well, we really, really need your support on patreon.com/solidarityhouse, where you can help fund our ongoing information pushback, as well as the other activities that we do as part of Solidarity Collective. So thanks a lot, and we will catch you all on the flip side.